Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, March 27th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 159 days. The game against Michigan in 243 days. We're going to be talking recruiting today. It has been a very busy week in the recruiting world, with the Buckeyes landing a couple commitments, the Buckeyes losing a commitment or a target to Michigan, and a whole bunch of other stuff going on, and potentially a few more commitments coming in the relatively short term. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff with our good buddy Alex Gleitman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. He and Mark Giffler have been very, very busy on the recruiting beat over the last week or so with a lot of visits, a couple of those commitments, as we mentioned, and a whole bunch more. So, Alex, I guess let's start with the big news from Monday, the commitments of not one but two offensive linemen from Northern Ohio, Devontae and Deontae Armstrong. They are both committed to Ohio State. They are both twins. They are, in fact, twins with each other, as you might assume, based on the fact that they share a last name and very similar first names. And Alex, this feels like this was one of these Ohio State-Michigan battles that feels like they're starting to become a little bit more common in the recruiting world than they have been the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a good recruiting win in general for Ohio State. Offensive line was a huge position of need. They had Ian Moore first on board. They had Mark Nave second on board, and now to get these two kids, you have four offensive linemen already committed, and it's not even April 1st yet. So to check the boxes on your biggest position of need on the offensive side of the ball, in my opinion, that's great in and of itself. But then you look at who Ohio State beat. They beat Penn State. They beat Michigan. Georgia offered both Armstrong twins. Kentucky has been a thorn in Ohio State's side a little bit. There's some other, big time programs, Michigan State and Wisconsin, that have offered. So they not only got two really good offensive linemen today, but they kept them away from Big Ten foes like Michigan and Penn State, and potentially a national title foe in Georgia.
And these are two guys who they camped together last year. They have visited together. They're twins, so it's sort of natural to lump these two together, and it's Devontae and Deontae, and they all get mentioned. They just get mentioned together every time you talk about them, it feels like. But these are, in fact, two different people, and they are also kind of two different prospects. So where do they both kind of project maybe at the college level?
Yeah, so Devontae is, they're not that far off in size. I think Deontae is a little bit taller, longer, maybe 6'7", 280 versus Devontae, who is, maybe an inch shorter, and a little bit broader. So I would say Devontae, they primarily talk to him about playing the inside of the offensive line, probably a guard. But he does have the ability to kick outside and play, probably right tackle. Deontae, though, they're strictly talking to him about being an offensive tackle, and whether that's the right or left side, he could play either. He's just, a little bit longer, as I said, a little bit taller, moves a little bit better. But I think versatility is always the key. So just like with Ian Moore, a guy who could play outside, also potentially inside. Mark Nave, versatility, guard or center. I think Deontae is a pure tackle, but Devontae does give them flexibility. Probably will end up at guard, but could play tackle as well. So I think of the four that they have, this is pretty big, these commitments, because Deontae is like the only true tackle, whereas I could see potentially the others all ending up inside. Not that that's necessarily going to happen, but it very well could. So we'll see.
An offensive line is a pretty big position of need for the Buckeyes this cycle. You did a sort of projected class about a week and a half ago. At this point, we had talked about doing a morning show about that column last week, and then sort of real life intervened and didn't let that happen. But I will give you credit. You had both of them in your projected class. You had Jordan Marshall, who we'll talk about in a little bit, not in that class. So far you are 3 for 3 on the in or out on some of those guys. But with that class, you talked about the fact that they were going to need 5, maybe even 6 if you get the right guys, offensive linemen in this class. But to have 4 this early in the cycle, including now really a true tackle prospect, this feels like this is a very, very good start for Justin Frye.
Yeah, great start for him, and it sure helps when you have some really good offensive linemen in the state of Ohio to be able to choose from. I mean, Ian Moore from Indiana, right? So that's not even, that's closer than some places in Ohio, probably to drive to him. And then, Mark Nave and the Armstrong twins. So you have 3 in-state guys, you have a regional guy. It helps to have talent in the area because, it's so much just easier to recruit your region and your state. And, there's other guys. Look, there's other guys in the state. There's William Satterwhite. There's, Ben Roebuck and Luke Hamilton, who are both committed to Michigan. Take those 3, take the 3 that they have committed. That's at least, there's definitely a few other kids too. Jake Wheelock. There's a couple other guys. So there's, probably anywhere from 7, 8, 9, 10 maybe offensive linemen in the state of Ohio that if they offered them, you wouldn't have thought twice. It just would have made sense. So that's always a great start. But I think the best thing, as I said, it's not even April 1st. Justin Fry has 4 of those spots. They can end their class right now and be happy with the 4 guys they got. But I do think they want at least 5. They could go up to 6 if it's the right. But having these 4 in the hopper, 4 really solid commitments who, recruiting's crazy, you never know, but I don't think are going to be going anywhere unless something drastic happens. It allows you to be very, very selective with who takes that last spot or maybe last 2 spots. So getting those guys in the hopper, allowing Justin Fry now to kind of laser focus on, figuring out who else they're going to bring into the fold is just absolutely huge for this class.
And we mentioned earlier, this was a recruitment where Ohio State was going head-to-head with Michigan, and it feels like for about a decade, Ohio State and Michigan have not really had any really high-profile battles, or not very many. There was sort of the odd, the odd one here and there. Zach Harrison, for example, was a pretty high-profile Ohio State-Michigan battle. But Ohio State has won essentially all of them over the last decade or so against Michigan. You're kind of going back to Kyle Kalis. Nolan Rumler, I guess, went to Michigan, but I don't know how hard Ohio State was pursuing him. There have not been that many, especially in the state of Ohio. So then you go back last week, Jordan Marshall, the running back out of the Cincinnati area, who Ohio State was very much interested in, he chooses Michigan. He chooses Michigan pretty early in the cycle. This was a recruitment that ended, I think, maybe a little earlier than some people were expecting. And, yes, they've added Luke Hamilton and Ben Roebuck. Those are guys who did not have Ohio State offers, but they are from the state of Ohio, so that you sort of saw the narrative forming that, oh boy, Michigan is coming in and they're going to plant the flag in the state of Ohio and all that kind of stuff. I guess the question that people are probably wondering is the Jordan Marshall thing. Is that a blip? Is that a one kid who decided that Michigan was a better choice? And, Michigan as a program has been doing very well, and they've beaten Ohio State a couple of years in a row, and they've won the Big Ten a couple of years in a row, and they're doing just fine with their running backs. So you can see how that would be an appealing thing. But is that a blip? Is that a one-off? Or is that maybe, is there cause for concern for Ohio State fans that Michigan may start coming in and start pulling kids that Ohio State has offered out of the state?
I tend to think it's a blip. That's my gut. But I think, let's see. Look, Ohio State fans aren't going to want to hear me saying this. And I still think when you talk about who's the best team in the Big Ten, talent-wise, top to bottom, play 10 times, who's going to win at least 6. I think it's Ohio State over Michigan still. I think what Ohio State did against Georgia, I think kind of justifies that in my mind. But 2 years in a row, Ohio State's gotten their butts whooped by Michigan. 2 years in a row, Michigan has won the Big Ten. So any objective person sitting there could arguably and probably very well say Michigan is the best program in the Big Ten right now, given how the last 2 years have played out. And so, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if there are some more battles inside the state of Ohio that Michigan wins head to head. But to this date, it's right now still only Jordan Marshall. And until that changes, I think it's going to be a blip. Now, if they come in and they get a Bryce West or an Aaron Scott or both of them, that's going to change my thinking that there is something to this. But I still think Ohio State gets Bryce West. I still think that they get Aaron Scott. And I think that the only in-state guy that Michigan ends up pulling that Ohio State actually wanted in this class is Jordan Marshall. Because as you said, they didn't offer Luke Hamilton. They have plenty of opportunities to do so. They did not offer Ben Roebuck. They had plenty of opportunities to do so. Those kids could say whatever they want now, but both of them would have walked to Columbus, Ohio to play for Ohio State. If you said walk to Columbus and you get your offer, they both would have done it from, the two sides of the state. So it's just, until it happens, again, I am going to feel like this is a blip. But I do think that there's going to be some more battles. Michigan's got a little swagger in their step right now, and I think they're coming in with like a little bit of a, if they come in and they don't get a kid that Ohio State wants, it's a win-win for them, right? Like, they're either making Ohio State work harder for a kid that they were going to get anyway, or they're actually going to get the kid. So they actually have a shot now, whereas 4 or 5 years ago, you're kind of laughing it off anytime they tried to do that. Kentucky had a better shot probably to get an Ohio kid that Ohio State wanted. But I'm going to say blip, but I think it is something to watch, because I do think that for kids who maybe like Jordan Marshall, I know some of his family members were Ohio State fans, but he himself wasn't like a kid who like grew up so passionate about Ohio State. And like, you see that in Cincinnati more often than like in Northeast Ohio. But, I think if Michigan continues to have the success they have, especially against Ohio State, you're going to see this more and more. So I would just say win the freaking game this year. That's it. And that will be the best solution to all their problems. But I don't think that this is going to be a massive problem for Ohio State.
Well, we'll see if Ryan Day is listening to the show, because that seems like that's probably good advice for him, that's something he should consider doing this year. You have been talking to a whole bunch of guys. This is a very busy time of the year for recruiting, because all these spring practices, they're bringing guys in every time we're in spring practice, and we will be in practice again on Tuesday morning. Tony and Kevin and I will be inside. We get to watch a little bit of practice on Tuesday, and we will see recruits there. And we saw recruits there when we were there last week, and we saw recruits when we were there the week before that. And so you see these guys. This is a very busy time of the year for recruiting. A lot of guys have been visiting, and you've kind of been hinting on our board that this may not be the only 2 commitments that are coming in the sort of near future. So I know you don't want to spill the beans, but it seems, on specific names, but it certainly seems like there could be a couple more guys coming in. I mean, next few weeks, next month, before the spring game, something like that. Is that, how many potential more commitments are at least on the radar for Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I feel pretty good about at least 2 more, very possibly 3 more, and potentially 4 more in like the relative near future for Ohio State. So I think we'll see. Like, it's hard because when you're told things about like a kid being in, and like sometimes like silently, like basically telling the staff that they're in, but not ready to public announce it. Like, for example, the Armstrongs were supposed to originally announce on Sunday, and they ended up like waiting till Monday midday. That's not too much of a delay, but sometimes a kid tells the staff their intentions or knows what they want to do, and then it takes a week for a graphic to be made or to film a video, and like sometimes, or like they want to wait for like a parent's birthday, or maybe they want to just like come back for the spring game and like announce it publicly there and like create some momentum for the program, like with all these other visitors coming. So there's a lot of factors that go into the when. I like to focus on like the where someone's going to go. And I feel pretty good about at least 2 more I would say I feel good about 3 more of the prospects that were there this past weekend coming on board. I think there's one other one that I think could come in the near future as well. And then this coming weekend, there is going to be another big visitor weekend, and I could see another few guys potentially making their commitments. I mean, one of them is not even a secret. Aaron Noland, quarterback. I'm not saying Ohio State's going to get him, but I do think he already has a commitment date scheduled for April 8th. So, you're talking potentially a week after he visits. So that's just one example. But there's a few other guys that are going to be visiting this coming weekend that could pop as well. So you could be looking at 5, 6 commitments in the near future, and this class can quickly double in size.
Yeah, then we have been tracking a bunch of this stuff. Alex does a great job catching up with a lot of these guys after their visits, getting that sort of initial intel, and then kind of getting a sense for maybe where things may be headed. And you can get all of that information on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That is exclusive to our members. Lots of great insight and intel there for you as we are kind of heading into what is one of the high points of recruiting during the year. You go back to last year's spring game. There were a couple commitments that came out of that. A lot of visitors that came there that ended up in the Ohio State class. This is a very busy time on the recruiting calendar, and you're going to want to be at BuckeyeHuddle.com to keep track of all of it. We have Alex and Mark both saying very, very busy there, writing about all these guys, all the visitors, all the commitments, all the rumors, what you're hearing, what they're hearing, all that great stuff, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So, as we say, if you have never tried a membership site before, give it a try. Try it out for a month. It is going to be a very busy, entertaining month there as we track all of the football stuff going on, all the recruiting stuff going on, and much, much more. We will be at practice later today. I have all sorts of stuff on our practice report there on the board. And then we were going to be at the student practice on Saturday where they bring all the students in. Student Appreciation Day. We'll be there for that one as well. Plenty of player interviews, coach interviews, all that kind of stuff, all this week at BuckeyeHuddle.com and YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. So make sure you check both of those out. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.